Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. Time again for Spawn Daily. We're up to issue number 46. Another really fantastic issue. This book is so good. I remember the criticisms of Spawn early on, the criticisms of a lot of the early Image books, especially with lateness. And I get it, right? Retailers were paying for books, and then they wouldn't even be there to sell. They wouldn't even show up in the shipments to sell, to recoup their money. Yes, all of the guys that founded Image were known for their artwork, not necessarily for their writing skills. Doesn't mean they don't know how to tell a story. Doesn't mean that they can't learn how to shore up their weaknesses. And, we said it a lot early on that McFarlane was very repetitious. There was a lot of info dumps. There were walls of dialogue. That's all gone away here. The other thing that we mentioned was when he was drawing the book as well as writing it, that he would often say things in the dialogue or in the exposition boxes that you could clearly see in the art. I think splitting up the writing duties and the art duties, once he's teaming up, in this case with Tony Daniel, Greg Capullo's doing every other issue, that you didn't see that as much. Yes, he can still be wordy. Yes, he can still be expositional. But with that addition of the summary inside the front cover, and just, I think with him doing it and with him being talented and him knowing how to tell a story visually, that and eventually you get better telling it narratively. And it's like anything. The more you do it, for the most part, the more you do it, the better you're going to get. So let's go ahead and dive into the issue. As I said, Tony Daniel is his artist on this one. We have a really cool cover from Tony Daniel with Spawn looking very buff with the majestic cape and the big collar, and Daniel's signature bat that he likes to put in the backgrounds for Spawn. There's some down at the bottom as well. So if we look inside the front cover, we see story by McFarlane. Tony Daniel does the pencils, Kevin Conrad on inks, Tom Orzechowski handling the letters, Tom Broeker and Roy Young on colors. And interesting because, I talked a lot last time we had a Tony Daniel, Kevin Conrad rendered book about how it seemed like the colors were very much computer colorized, and it had a painterly quality. There wasn't a lot of sharpness to the backgrounds. And so I wanted to pay attention to this time to see if I thought that was the case, or maybe if they went back to coloring traditionally, or if they figured out how to still do computer coloring but have it be a little more traditional. And there is the aforementioned summary paragraph there talking about Spawn 43. Tiffany and Spawn continue their battle. Spawn's internal neuro system released that explosion of pure malicious energy. All the animals attacked her. Spawn headed back to New York. Detective Burke realized that him and Twitch probably weren't ever going to get their jobs back with the NYPD, so they're planning on opening their own detective agency. We saw Wanda go to the doctor. She's worried that she got Terry sick. And then Spawn talked to Cog at the end, with Cog warning him that, hey, if you don't get control of your costume, it's going to take you over. And the way it's put in the paragraph here, the costume will take ultimate control. So clearly that could be a problem. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, there's a family that's just sitting down to dinner when there's a knock at the door. Guy goes to open it. There's a couple of clearly mafia thugs on the other side. So this guy's an accountant or a low-level something or other for the mob. It's clear he doesn't want to go with them. They flash a gun, threaten his wife and kid. So of course he decides to go with them, telling his wife, and I'm sure he sees the writing on the wall, telling his wife, hey, make sure you tell our daughter how much I love her when you tuck her in bed tonight, and you look beautiful tonight, and I'll be home late. And he gets in the car where Tony Twist, Vito Gravano, whatever name he's going by this week, is there with him. And sure enough, guy takes a bullet to the brain. They kick him out on the street. The wife is hysterical, we are told. It takes her hours before she can stop crying. They come and take the body away, but the blood stain on the sidewalk never goes away. And we see Tony Twist there, pretty happy with this turn of events, actually. I mean, obviously he ordered the hit, but he loves that they did it right there in the neighborhood. He says Johnny was too dumb, too stupid to be stealing from me on his own, but this will serve as a warning to whoever else might have been helping them, and they'll probably panic, and then they'll give themselves away, and I can take care of them also. So as Tony goes back into his office, he tells one of his hitmen, hey, keep an eye on that neighborhood. Let me know if you see anything suspicious. And the hitman says, okay, sure, whatever. He walks out. And then Tony gets a call, and it's from the family over in Italy, the ones that lent Tony Overkill, and they're demanding him back. And we're told that every devil has its master, even Vito Gravano. So, just because he's a big guy here, there's always somebody else higher. And he needs to figure out how to get them back what they need. Otherwise, Tony's going to be the one that ends up with a bullet in his head. So meanwhile, we check in on the worms and the maggots and whatnot that the costume that Spawn's livery, his symbiotic costume, had deposited in the dumpster near where he stays. And it's talking about how it smuggled these worm maggot sort of things in the folds of its cloak along with some soil where it stayed hidden, and it could continue to absorb evil. And then it's basically a snack for the costume. It's a way for the costume to recharge, and Spawn's not going to let anything come to harm this. We see some rats trying to eat them, and yeah, that's not going to happen. So just a little reminder of the way the costume can regenerate itself, as opposed to actually the energy that Spawn has, that Malbolgia gave him, that he uses to heal or uses to fight or what have you. And we're also told about the way these worms and insects and whatnot are sort of magnets, sponges for the aura of evil that can be found in living things. And Spawn, Al Simmons, he hasn't been doing enough bad things to nourish the costume, is basically what it comes down to, right? Like, we know this costume is from hell itself, was born there. It's a creature of hell. Unlike Al Simmons, who used to be a man born on Earth, obviously has a body of necroplasm or psychoplasm now, but still, he's not made of the same stuff. So even though his body's made of that substance that's from hell, it doesn't nourish him in that way. Right, he needs something different. Maybe it's because of the way he sees his body, right? Like, he envisions his body being human, so that's why he has bones and a heart and whatever, even if he doesn't need them to function technically. The power that Malbolgia gave him sustains him. But what sustains the costume, what sustains the symbiote, is the evil that he can extract from these lower life forms. And we're told that they are in effect bottled sin. So you can think of them just as sin in a receptacle, and that's what the costume can feed on to nourish itself. So there's a couple of the homeless guys, and they happen to wander into Spawn's area, and he turns around, he's got the worms all over his face, and they kind of freak out and go running away. They're grossed out by it, as I think a lot of people would be, seeing that in the dark as Spawn's absorbing the sin, or his costume rather is absorbing the sin. And Cogliostro, we see there, is looking on and definitely worried about what Al Simmons is doing. Meanwhile, we check in on Wanda and Terry. Wanda is looking at some paperwork. She's about to start construction on the children's wing of the hospital that she's been overseeing and raising funds for. Still don't know who the anonymous donation was from. We know it was strings pulled by Jason Wynn. And I'm still convinced that once the construction starts, Wynn's going to pull the rug out from under her. That's going to be the pressure point that he puts on her per Malbolgia's instructions. We see Terry come home. He's feeling really sick and looks worn down, hugs his daughter, and then heads off to bed. So as I said about last issue, how I really love it when McFarlane touches on these other plot threads. We get even if it's just a peek for a page or two of what these other characters are doing, it feels like it expands the scope of the story. It's nice to check in on them, keep their story momentum going. Like I said, even if it's only for a page or two. Meanwhile, we see the hitman who took out Johnny at the beginning of the issue. We find out his name's Orca because he's giant and he's white. So he's like a whale and he's a killer. So Orca. And he goes to get in his car, and we see that somebody attacks him, and we're told that even though he had a body count that was so high he couldn't keep track of it anymore, his number's just been capped. But by who, we're not sure yet. Meanwhile, the next morning, we see another of Vito Gravano's guys going to collect protection money from one of the shopkeepers in the neighborhood. The guy's like, I don't have your money. I'm sorry. And the protection guy's like, well, you're never late. You never don't have our money. I don't believe you. And he goes into the back room to look for it himself. And again, he just like Orca, he meets a pretty terrible fate. And then a little later, in Vito Gravano's office, there's a box that's delivered, and it's got the heads of Orca and that protection guy. So Gravano loses it. I want whoever did this dead. Nobody does this to my guys. I'm not talking next week or tomorrow. I'm talking right now. I want that son of a bitch killed tonight. Somebody just started a war. So, he's pretty upset, but they don't even know where to start looking. I mean, how would you? So meanwhile, as Spawn is snacking on the bottled sin, I guess you'd say, Cogliostro shows up, and again, he's talking to Spawn. He's in a way he's trying to educate him, but it's like he doesn't just want to give Spawn the answers. It's kind of like that old saying, right? Like, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day, but if you teach him how to fish, he can, feed himself for the rest of his life. That's what Cogliostro is trying to get through to Spawn, right? Because Spawn's telling him, yeah, so I battled this angel and I killed her. All that was left was her skeleton. She was eaten alive. And Cogliostro's like, skeleton? Like, what are you talking about? She's not dead. She's still alive. And Spawn's like, no, what are you talking about? All that was left was her skeleton. And he says, just like you, angels don't have bones, right? Like that's not a thing. And the only way to kill them would be to absorb their light, which you didn't do. So she's probably still here on Earth, and she could be anywhere because angels can shapeshift. She's very similar to, for lack of a better term. She's not human. She doesn't have bones. Maybe that's how you perceive her, because she's choosing to have you perceive her that way, but that's not really what she's made out of. And the fact that you are evil and you're made out of necroplasm, that's something that angels can sense. So she could be anywhere. She could be waiting for you. She could make herself look like a bum or a hooker or a dog and get close to you, and you'd never know it. And Spawn's like, okay, so what should I do? And Cogliostro's like, he's at his wit's end. He's like, oh, for the love of Pete, learn, right? You're a Spawn. And you think you're human, but you're not. Those days are gone. So you have all these people that are after you, Mount Bolgia, Sam and Twitch, these different angels, heaven. You're stuck in between this war between heaven and hell. You got to pick up the slack. You got to learn. You got to learn the ropes. But you keep ignoring, all the signs, all parts of the game. And you need to be aware. You need to be up to speed on this stuff, because you can't control this massive fight between heaven and hell. The people on Earth, I know Spawn's not technically a person, right? Because he's not human. But he says, those on Earth, us on Earth, we're just the middlemen, is the way Cogliostro puts it. So Spawn's kind of annoyed. He's like, so what's the point then? What are we doing? Should we just get out of the way and let them fight it out? And he says, the point is to fight for what's right. I mean, the whole reason you came back, the whole reason you made the deal was for your wife, because you wanted to be with her, and that's what's right. So why are you giving up? And Spawn's like, well, it's too hard, right? I got Terry, I got Phil Violator, I got Angela, I got Jason Wynn. I don't even know where to turn. And Cogliostro's like, well, they're pieces of the puzzle, and you need to start putting the puzzle together, right? Stop waiting around for somebody to give you the answers. Like, go out there and learn and have agency, and be in control, just like you need to be in control of your costume. And again, Al Simmons is like, I I don't know how to do that. And so Cog's like, well, you can start by remembering what I told you about your costume and how hell wants you to act instinctively. You need to think about what you're doing and be deliberate and stop just playing into others' hands and reacting. And he goes into the dumpster and he pulls out a big glob of the worms. He goes, "This is a perfect example. You've been playing right into the hands. You're letting these worms, feed your costume and siphon evil." And it's interesting what Spawn says. What Al Simmons says, "Well, I need them." And he goes, and Cogliostro says, "Well, I mean, you need nourishment, but not this way. You're letting your uniform call the shots. And if you want to be a real man, open your eyes, open your ears, and learn." And it's interesting because when Spawn says, "I need them," he almost sounds like a junkie, like he's hooked on the aura of evil that these things put out. And to Cogliostro's point, he's sort of right. You do need nourishment, you do need energy, but not this way. We know that Al Simmons is not an evil guy. We know the symbiote needs evil aura to exist, but there's got to be a better way. Like, don't just give in to what the costume wants. Again, going back to the idea of the costume as the enemy, the closest enemy, and Al Simmons maybe being weak and not even realizing it. So then we check in on another one of Vito Gravano's wise men, I guess, another one of his employees who's having a little fun with a couple of hookers. And when he takes a break to go to the bathroom, the whole entire toilet is literally pulled through the wall, and we finally see who is the one that's been doing this. And it turns out it's a guy named Tremor. We saw him first in issue 25. He wasn't named in issue 25, but we did get his origin. He worked for Vito Gravano. He got transformed through some experiments and some uses of chemicals and other various means into the greatest hitman. But he suffered, he tortured. He only did it to save his wife and kids who were being held against their will, being held hostage by Gravano. And now he was able to finally escape. He was supposed to be this brainless weapon that Gravano could just point at whatever he wanted dead. But the guy retained some intelligence enough to go after Gravano. So he's looking for his revenge now. And the reason he went after this guy is because this guy knows where Gravano lives. So it's not too long before Tremor shows up at Gravano's house to get his final revenge to kill him. But Gravano has an ace up his sleeve, and he says, "You can't kill me because I was worried that you'd come back. And so I never killed your brother. I kept him as insurance. He's still alive, and I know where he is." And Tremor at first doesn't believe him, but then after he thinks about it, he thinks, that's exactly something I would expect Gravano to do. And so instead, he just grabs his hostage and leaves and says he has some plans for Gravano. He's going to go for help, actually. And we see that on the next page when he goes to talk to Spawn, and he says, "Hey, Spawn, you remember me?" Spawn's like, "What the heck do you want?" And Tremor's like, "Oh, you're going to help me take out Gravano because I have the information you need." And Spawn's like, "I'm not gonna help you." And the reason that we find out that Tremor took that henchman, the reason he took him along to go meet with Spawn, he says, "Hey, why don't you tell this guy the names that you just told me?" And this guy that works for Gravano says, "Wanda Blake, Terry Fitzgerald, Cyan Fitzgerald, Jason Wynn." And Spawn's got like a shocked expression on his face, and Tremor says, "That's enough. So what do you say now, partner?" So very much seems like Spawn is going to be teaming up with Tremor. Whether or not that's a good thing or bad thing, I guess we'll have to wait and see. As far as the art, as you can see as I'm flipping through, it is, I would say, more detailed. The backgrounds tend to be a little more detailed than they were the last Tony Daniel issue we had drawn, but it does seem like there are a few pages where we still get those like computerized colored backgrounds, a few panels here and there where it just doesn't bring much to the story. And again, I can't speak to exactly what's happening or exactly why they're choosing to do it that way. Maybe it's just for speed purposes. Maybe they're learning how to uh, color with the computer program. But it's just as detailed as the foreground work is, and as much as I enjoy it, and I do see some McFarlane influence in the way Tony Daniels doing his anatomy, it's not, I don't think overall the artwork is as detailed as what Capullo's is. And Capullo's style at this time, at the time in the 90s when these were being released, it was much closer to McFarlane style than Tony Daniels. But the other thing that's interesting is you can see the McFarlane influence on both Capullo and Daniel. So I think in collected edition, they're not that far off that it would be kind of jarring or pull you out of the story. Although you might notice the lack of detail or the interesting way they're coloring every other issue when Daniels does it. So overall, a really, really fun issue. Like I said last time, I love the fact that we're bringing in some of these other plot threads. We did not get Salmon Twitch this issue, but that's okay. We got Gravano, quite a bit of him. We got plenty of Spawn. We got Cogliostro. We checked in on Wanda and Terry. So again, it felt like a big chunk of story. I like the fact that Cogliostro is trying to kick Spawn in the butt in a lot of ways. You know, he's like, dude, you came back because you wanted to be with your wife, because you wanted, in a way, to be a man, right? To be human, to be alive again. In order to do those things. Like, yes, you're not a man anymore, but you can still learn. You can still stand up and act like a man. You can act with some agency. Stop just reacting and learn and grow and, you know, learn about your costume, take control of it. Like, he's really trying to motivate Spawn. Like, what now? And now what his motivations are for doing this still remains somewhat of a mystery. And I'm sure we'll find it out at some point, because Cogliostro, as we've been told, is a member of some society he's not on heaven's side, he's not on hell's side, sort of on his own side. So I don't know. For all I know, they could be the arms dealers in the situation, right, where they benefit from an open warfare between heaven and hell because they get to supply the weapons to both sides. Who knows? I'm speculating, but overall, love where the story's going. Really enjoying Daily Spawn, enjoying getting a chance to read these. I mean, we are far beyond where I read on my own. I had definitely given up, dropped Spawn, wasn't collecting anymore at this point. I think I dropped it somewhere around issue 30. So never have read these before. They really hold up. Really enjoying it. And, you know, I got what, 200, little under 300 issues to go, 280 issues, maybe, 290 issues. So hope you guys are going to be along for the ride the whole time. So anyway, that's going to do it for this episode. We appreciate you joining as always, and we'll talk to you next time.